I am currently alone working a night shift at a hospital morgue. I work as a cleaner, which means I've seen, smelled, and heard horrific things. I started a year ago, but strange things have only started happening recently. I want to document what's happened tonight. Firstly, the porters brought a recently deceased man down to be processed into the freezers. I did the paperwork and put him into the freezer until the examination tomorrow. The freezers are empty apart from this man, as the funeral home collected the rest earlier. This is important. I sat down in my office, which overlooks the freezer drawers and the examination table. I started playing chess until I looked up and saw the door to the freezer open. I went in and shut the door, creeped out but thinking maybe I didn't shut it properly. I sat down again and continued my game of chess. I won the game around 5 minutes later, so I looked up and the freezer door was open again. I knew I had locked the door, so at this point I was very creeped out. I looked around the empty hallway to check that no one was there, and as I thought, it was just me and a dead body, or so I thought. I locked the door again and went back to the office. I was so uncomfortable being near the room and felt like I was being stared at from the corners of the room. Suddenly, a door crashed into the wall behind me like a rhino had just barged into it. I could barely breathe from fear and grabbed the radio to call security. I turned back to the room overlooking the examination table, and there was a woman's body on the table. I dropped the radio and screamed, all the time staring at a body that shouldn't have been there. Like I said earlier, there should be only one body here, the man's. After catching my breath, I radioed security, and they thought I was joking. About 5 minutes later, one security guard showed up, confused as he looked at this body. The toe tag said the person died in 1994 at Queen Royal Hospital. The year is 2016, and this is Dr. Wright Surgical Hospital. How is there a body from 22 years ago lying on the table? We called the police, but when we had our backs turned, the body disappeared from the table as quickly as it had arrived. We both went into the room, but it was empty. A feeling of dread came over me as I checked the freezers. Bay 1 was empty, Bay 2 was empty, Bay 3 was empty, and Bay 4 had clothes in it. The man's clothes. But he was gone. I went to tell the security guard, but he wasn't there. I looked everywhere until I tried to radio him. The radio never had any batteries in it. Who was the man who showed up? Where did he go? How did he make a dead raid radio work? All these questions, but no answers that will ever come. After tonight, I'm never coming back, but whatever happened here tonight, it's attached itself to me. I feel heavier, like I'm carrying someone on my back. I'm having thoughts that aren't mine. The second story. Tom and Adeline's kidnapping haunts me with relentless guilt. 5 years later, I still hang up missing posters, hoping for a miracle. They were taken right before my eyes, and I wish I had done more to save them. The reason for their abduction is a mystery, but I still have hope that they are out there somewhere. Tom and Adeline, my best friends, and a married couple adored by everyone, were in many ways my family. While some might have seen it as third-wheeling, I often joined them on nights out and countless holidays. Tom was your classic macho man, and Adeline was best described as the quiet bookworm who always got along with everyone. Finding a detractor for them was like locating a needle in a haystack. The idea of a weekend vacation just outside of town sounded like a blessing, so I was over the moon when Tom texted me the invite. Once the planning was done and everything packed, the day arrived and the happy couple picked me up on their way to Armadillo Ranch. As I often do, I fell asleep in the back seat during the trip. The sun was out when I dozed off, so I was quite shocked to be awoken at sunset by a bright yellow light shining through the windscreen. Being jolted awake left me in a daze, confused about where I was. With my memories muddled, I realized that Tom had been stopped by a policeman. Although I was technically awake, I felt as though many of my senses were faulty. After a brief exchange, we were back on the road. Funnily enough, I became fully alert after our departure. Now able to form thoughts, I quickly asked Adeline what that was all about. It was a police roadblock, she said. It seemed as though they were looking for someone, thankfully not us. Night had fallen by the time we reached the ranch, shortly after our encounter with the law. Tom had explained earlier that we had the whole place to ourselves. The location was small but featured a homely old wooden house with a large barn nearby. Passing through the front gate, we arrived at our weekend destination. It was pretty late, so we decided to scrap any evening plans and split up for the night. Tom and Adeline took the master bedroom, while I began to unpack in a single room along the main hallway. The building had an old smell to it, but it seemed largely well kept. It was exactly what you would expect from a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, made almost entirely out of wood. Settling into my room, I realized just how weak the nap in the car had made me feel. It was only as I lay down that I felt fully myself again. But by that point, I was already drifting into the land of dreams. 3 loud knocks burst me awake. I jumped out of bed and raced to the hallway, meeting Tom and Adeline, who seemed to do the same. "Who the hell is that?" I asked. Neither of my friends had an answer, reiterating that to their knowledge, this place was isolated. Motioning for his wife to stay behind, Tom and I took the lead towards the entrance. Slowly walking to the door, we heard 3 more knocks, this time more violent. I recall wishing I owned a gun, a mistake I have since corrected. After a short journey, we stood near the entry to the home. The rim of the door was lit by a bright yellow light from outside. Tom looked at me. As I mentioned before, he was a strong individual, but occasionally I would see fear in his eyes. This was one of those times. Before he could look back at the entrance, the light disappeared. Avoiding further hesitation, Tom swiftly marched to the door and swung it open. A scene of pure silence greeted us. Nobody was outside. Stepping out in search of a sign, neither Tom nor I could see any footprints or tire tracks. "What the fuck?" I whispered. "What the fuck indeed?" Tom exclaimed louder. We were only outside for a few minutes, but it was a mistake that I'll always regret. I remember Tom's next words as clearly as the moment he said them. Re-entering the house with me close behind, he asked his wife for her opinion. "What do you think, Adeline?" To our shock, she was gone. We searched every room, every closet, every hidden space. At first, Tom thought it was a prank, likely avoiding the reality that his worst fear had come true. I remember trying to decipher the mystery myself. The knocking on the door, combined with Adeline's disappearance, led me to insidious thoughts involving serial killers and kidnappers. Shouting out for his wife, Tom slammed his fist in anger against the wooden wall of the kitchen. We heard her as soon as his hand made contact for a 3rd time. Her blood-curdling scream came from the barn outside. To say we sprinted to the barn would be an understatement. It wasn't far, but Tom and I were still out of breath as we dove inside. Regaining our strength, our labored breathing created a noticeable fog in the cold air. The barn had been unused for some time, with worn floorboards creaking under our feet. Using his phone's flashlight, Tom darted from corner to corner. A rotting ladder covered one section while old tools were discarded in another. Soon after, the pool of bright red blood at the center became abundantly clear. Stepping nearer, we both knew that this was likely Adeline's. Distraught and panicking, I attempted to console Tom, but he shrugged me off. "It might not be hers," I said rather foolishly. The look Tom gave me had murderous intent, so I abstained from speaking further. As we crouched toward the ground to examine the scene, the flashlight on his phone seemed to dim. Once Tom was closer, the phone shut off entirely. Mumbling to himself, he seemed to have full confidence that his battery wasn't low when we entered the barn. After only a few seconds, the barn lit up with the same bright yellow light from before. Suddenly, the pool of blood became clear. To our surprise, it formed a perfect circle on the ground. At this stage, Tom was too preoccupied to question the light. As soon as the barn ignited in the yellow glow, I noticed my consciousness slipping. It was as though I was losing who I was, along with all my memories and personality. Practically falling asleep on my feet, the moment felt eerily similar to how I was earlier in the day. Fighting the nightmarish feeling, I stepped away from Tom, who was still kneeling by the blood. This was when I realized where the yellow light was coming from. Glancing above, I noticed the rays shining down through cracks in the roof. Whoever this intruder was, they were above us. I shouted to Tom many times, but nothing could divert his attention from the spherical stain. My soul was fading, so with all the strength I had left, I chose to leave the barn alone to confront whoever had kidnapped Adeline. Stumbling onto the ground outside, I turned and looked up to the roof of the structure, expecting to see a creepy voyeur peeking in from above. My blurred vision revealed not a person, but rather a long metallic tube floating in the night. Seconds before I passed out, the light it was emitting became brighter, and everything around me was illuminated in a shining blaze. I woke up in the hospital, surrounded by doctors who explained that I had been in a month-long coma. I soon learned that the owner of the ranch had discovered my unconscious body with Tom and Adeline's whereabouts unknown. I have gone back many times, searching the house, probing the barn. I've never found any clue as to what happened. In fact, the bloodstain was gone too. It was like we were never there at all. I don't know what happened that night. Much of it is still a riddle I've been trying to solve for years. More importantly, I don't know who abducted my friends. I spent today hanging up missing posters in a desperate attempt to see them again. Yet deep down, I fear that if they are still alive, they are somewhere beyond my reach.